What's up, guys? This is my second time recording this video. I actually did the whole thing and realized that my microphone wasn't recording, so I might be going a little fast this time around because I am in a time pinch, I guess, or just frustrated in general. It's all fine and dandy. Probably gonna cut all of this out. Anyways, without further ado, let's jump right into this video for the second time. Hopefully, I do it perfectly this way. So if you haven't seen my previous video on how to make your own RuneScape private server in 5 steps, then you should go watch that, because this goes straight from there onto the next thing that you should probably be doing, depending on who you are, what your intentions are, whether you're just trying to make your own private server for your friends and you to play on, whether you're trying to learn how to program, or if you're just trying to have fun and just experiment with something that you've never done before. This video is an extension to my last one, and I figured I might as well do this. I did this other video in 2017. It's been 2 years, and all of a sudden I'm starting to get some feedback, and well, I figured I might as well, because most of the feedbacks have been good. If you want more videos like this, just let me know in the comment section. I'll be happy to make more. I don't want to waste my time, but if I see that it actually helps people get past hurdles that took me years to get past, then I'm all for it. Literally, this stuff makes me excited. And once again, if you haven't seen this video, you might want to check it out. It's really like introductory. It uses sets up Eclipse, which is what we're going to be using in this video, and it kind of explains some of the basics in order to get your server running. This video assumes that you already know how to connect to the server, localhost, and play it, and this, that, and the other. What we're going to really be focusing on is port forwarding. And if you aren't familiar with what port forwarding is, well, we're going to show you right this. What is port forwarding? And this can give you the most advanced version of that, but we don't really need that. I'm just going to explain it to you. Port forwarding is basically the port that other people can connect to your network with. So websites use port 80. If you have port 80 open on your router, other computers outside of your network can connect to your router and access port 80, and then you can have certain applications respond to packets and this, that, and the other. Without getting too complicated, it's needed in order to have outside traffic connect to your computer. And that's basically it. This is one of the most complicated steps, I would say, outside from actually programming, because it's more of a networking side of things, and it can be very intimidating, and it can give people a lot of problems. I know personally I had a whole bunch of problems trying to port forward my first time around, and it can be a disaster. And I'm gonna tell you a couple things that you should watch out for when I'm doing this. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go to your terminal, type ipconfig all, right? This is gonna make a whole bunch of numbers pop up. Let's see, hold up, did I type this in properly? Yes, okay. So first thing you're gonna look for is your default gateway, right? And normally it's this number right here, 192.168.1.1. And what the default gateway really is your router's IP address, right? Whenever you type this into a browser, it's going to try and connect you to your router, and your router is going to ask you for a login username and a password. This can be where your first hurdle pops up, because every username and password is different per router. So if you have an ISP that gave you a router, and your ISP is your internet search provider, like Cox Internet or AT&T Internet, for example, and they'll lend you a router to use, and there's a username and password that is set by default that they typically want you to change. Your parents might have it set. The router password and username may have never been changed before, so it's default. And Basically, you need this information to log into your router to change all sorts of things, like your network name and your network password when you connect to it wirelessly, for example. I already have mine set, but you are probably going to have to go on Google, and I'm going to go ahead and show you that. Let me log in real quick. And this is what my router looks like. Yours is not going to look like this unless you have the same router as I do. Odds are probably not, right? And that's okay, because, you know, this part is... It's one of the most important parts, but it really does vary between router and router. They should be all relatively the same, and I'll show you just in a bit. So my router name is I don't even know offhand. It's XR500 default username and password. All right, and that's the first thing you need to do, you know. And my default username and password for this router in particular is admin and password, which is going to be a lot of people's default username and password, mind you, unless it's been changed. And if it's been changed, you know, tough luck, buddy. You might have to just reset your router by using that little button on the back. If you hit it with a pen, you might could just set it to default. But be aware that when you do that, you're going to do things like change the network name, right? Okay, that being said, you know, once you have your username and password and you've logged into your router, you want to kind of play around. It is different. Most of the time you'll notice that things are under advanced. Port forwarding. That's simple, you know, you just got to find port forwarding somewhere in your router. Your router might not even offer it. If that's the case, you probably have a router that your ISP gave you, and you might want to have to call them and ask them if they even allow port forwarding, because I remember back in the day when I was a child, or a little bit younger I should say, and I tried to port forward and my router wouldn't let me. My ISP wouldn't do it. I had to call them and they had to do it kind of for me. And I just told them the port name that I wanted to open, and that was it. So right here you can actually see the port that I opened up from my previous video. I'm going to go ahead and delete it just so we can start fresh, right? And let's see. So here we have some service names. Yada yada. I'm gonna have to change this. I'm not sure why this is here like this, but if you go in here and you go to your server IP, you go back to that little black box that you were looking at, and you'll see that your server IP address should be your IPv4 address, which is 192.168.1.2. Okay, and I'll explain what this number really means. If you remember earlier, I had you type in 192.168.1.1. That's your default gateway, right? That is what logs you into the router. That is your router's IP address locally on your network. That's what it identifies itself as. Well, it identifies my computer connected to the network as 192.168.1.1. It's literally just one up, right? While my phone, for example, if this is connected, it could be 192.168.1.3, okay? You know, it might not be specifically those numbers. It really all depends on how your router chooses to sort everything, but that's kind of how this works. Just for a little tidbit of extra detail. So we're going to go ahead and add this IP address in there, okay? HTTP is 80 by default. We don't want that, so I'm going to go ahead and edit this. I'm going to go click this, edit service. What we want to open up for private servers in particular is TCP, and we're going to rename this RSPS, right? We're going to name this 43594, which is the most common IP address that servers use to open up their network. You can use 5555, which is another one that people use. We're going to use 43594 because, you know, most people are familiar with that, and why not, right? For the protocol, you want to use TCP. The difference between these two, it's a real subtle one. Most RSPS do use TCP. You might could use both. It really makes not too big of a difference. It's just a bunch of extra that honestly I don't even remember. It was something a long time ago. I think one of them accepts connections before it takes packets in, and then the other one just takes in packets, you know. However that works specifically, you know, maybe someone could chime in with a Google search. But anyways, we're gonna go ahead and apply this, right? And all this does is says that on my computer, my internal IP address, that this port is open to the public, right? That's what port forwarding does. That's essentially what it is. And once this step is done, there's one more thing that you need to do. You need to realize that your IP address actually changes, right? So like if you go onto Google, I'm gonna go to this website right here because we're gonna use that in a second, and it'll tell me your IP address right here changes. It's always changing. That means it's dynamic. So if your IP address is always changing, it means it's dynamic. You want a static IP address in order to allow people to continue connecting to your computer. For example, your computer to the public is represented through this number, right? And that number is arbitrary. It can always change, or you can always represent your computer with the same number every single time. And in order to do that, you need to set up a static IP address. Now, the way to do that on Windows, okay, so this is different, and you don't even necessarily have to do this step because there are other applications out there which, you know, I could show you after the fact called, well, I'll show you right now, things like noip.com. This is a domain or a name server website type of deal where what it'll do is they'll have a domain like my RSPS.hop2.org, and this server will always represent your IP address. So that means that you can have a dynamic IP address, but you can always reference to that through the name server. And then if you sign up on this website and download their stuff and then create you a name server, which honestly it's really, really simple. Like, I'm not really going to get into that because I'm about to show you how to make your IP address static. If you're not interested in making a static IP address, you might want to just do this with the IP address on no IP, you know, and just use a name server, which a lot of people do that. It's what I did when I first started, but this isn't really necessary. I'm not gonna go ahead and install this because I'm gonna show you how to make a static IP address. So I'll reference this link in the description. So let's go back to our little block box. We're gonna close this out, and here we are. We're gonna go into our Ethernet. So we're gonna look for these DNS servers right here, 8888. That's actually Google servers. You can use these if you'd like. It's not gonna mess with your internet. It just basically allows you to find domain servers through a different list versus your regular ISP servers. More complicated jargon. Don't worry about it if you don't get it now. It's really not that important to know. Alright. So what you want to do if you're on a Windows computer is you want to go into your network settings. Right, we're going to go to Wi-Fi. And then we're going to go to change adapter options. This is Windows 10, by the way. If you're familiar with Windows at all, you know that the interfaces change all the time. We'll go to properties. We're going to go to Internet Protocol version 4. Right, we're going to go properties again. And we're going to use the following. We're going to press use the following address, right? Now here is where you want to type in the information that you see here, kind of copying it, but this allows it to be static. So we're going to just keep the same IP address that we already have, right? This computer's local IP address is 192.168.1.1. You want to get that from your IPv4 address field, right? Okay, well here's your subnet mask is 255.255.255. That typically stays the same all the time. Your default gateway. Well, what is your default gateway? Well, we already know that that's the router, so we went into log into that 168.1.1. Okay, and the DNS server that I'm using is Google, so you can type this in as well. And this 8888.8. Oh, oops. And you go 8.8.8.4. Oh, this is actually a 4. Whoops. And yeah, and it's literally that simple, and there you go. You have a static IP address. So, you know, whether or not that's something you really want to do, up to you. I think it's a lot simpler than people might realize, you know, if you're on a Windows computer. So once that's all set, and close this out, you'll realize that here we are. You should have internet. If you don't have internet at this point, probably did something wrong. So just be careful what you're setting those fields to. Make sure to use the IP config to get all that done. So here we are. This IP address will never change now. That's gonna be this computer's IP address to the public forever. So like I said, if that's something you want to do, it might not be. You might want to use noip.com. So regardless, I find it a lot easier to just set up a static IP address. That's if your local host, that's if you're hosting from your own computer anyways. So we opened up port 43594, right? So you might go ahead and type check, and you just be like, well, it's gonna take a second because it's gonna time out, but you'd be like, whoa, what I port forwarded? Why isn't it working? Well, I'm gonna tell you why it's not working right now, buddy. It's because you're not actually hosting anything. Like, you have the port open, but nothing's actually listening on that port. So listening means that the computer or some kind of software is waiting for some connection. It's listening. And if there's nothing listening for connections on that port, well then, you know, technically the port isn't accepting anything. It's going to time out even though it's open. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up our Eclipse, which if you don't have Eclipse set up at this point, you didn't watch my previous video, you should go back and watch it because it'll explain everything that you need to know about how to set up Eclipse and some of the common problems that you can run into, and basically the necessities to get the RSPS to run, right? So here we are. I'm gonna go ahead and close this because it could get confusing. And I have my client right here, I have my server right here, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and go into my launcher.java, right? And this is what starts my server, right? You know, it just opens all these things. I could explain this code later in the future, but I'm going to wrap this video up and I'm just going to go ahead and run this. I think it's important to say that there should be another setting somewhere where your port is set in the server. So for the port I'm listening on, the port I opened up is 43594, right? I also have the port 43594 open in my router, and this is my listener, right? This is what's gonna listen for packets on that port. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this in debug mode. It's gonna start it up. Okay. Then we're gonna go ahead and check port again, and you can see that now it's realizing that you can connect to port 43594, right? So if you got this far, now we can go into our client, right? And we're gonna go into our loader here. And you'll notice that the IP address that this client is connecting to is the one that I have right here. The one that is static, the one that is mine. That means that any person that connects to the internet, if they try to connect through the ClearNet to this IP address on this port, they should be able to as long as this thing's online. Now, I think one of the things that people should be aware of is that whenever you open up a port, you're kind of making yourself vulnerable to the outside public. So, and essentially, so if you're familiar with like a DDoS, familiar with the DDoS network, a DDoS attack, it's basically when somebody sends a bunch of connections to the port that you have open. A lot of the times it's port 80, right? Because that's the website. And it'll crash that network's internet completely. So if someone decides that they want to DDoS your account, they can use this port with this IP address and essentially cut down your whole network, your whole internet. Everyone that's connected can't connect anymore, and vice versa. Which is why, you know, you want to be careful whenever you're using your own computer to host video games or like RSPS in particular online. You know, if you run into problems with your ISP where you can't actually port forward, this is another reason why you might want to do something like this. You might want to look into something called a virtual private server. I know I couldn't personally port forward for a long time because I lived in a rural area where the internet ISP provider was pretty terrible. And essentially what a virtual private server is a computer somewhere in the world where you can use it just like you use your own computer, but it's guaranteed uptime, and you know, you can buy different packages. You know, just a simple Google search, you can find virtual private servers right here. You know, I'm not advocating for this server at all, but if you look there, they can be really cheap, you know, $11 a month. You know, it really all depends on what your uses are. If you're hosting a server that you want people to play on, a lot of people, you know, you might want to invest in one of these because it's worth it. You can have uptime, you don't have to use your own hardware to host things, and also a lot of these VPS companies provide like DDoS protection because, well, if they don't, every customer that they have is getting DDoS, you know. It really depends because, see, a VPS is one computer that a bunch of people share on, so just keep that in mind. So yeah, you might want to use a virtual private server. Like I was saying earlier, if you set up a no IP address, you can use that instead. My dog has to use the bathroom. Huh? Oh, that's so you gotta use the bathroom. I'll be right back. I'll be right back. All right. What was I saying? Okay, so yeah, so if you have a no IP address set up, you can use that instead to connect to, and it looks something like this. So this might be useful if you don't want to set up a static IP address. That means that this number will change, but as long as you have a no IP address, no IP application open, it'll just point, this name server will point to this IP address, whichever one it is at that given moment, because it's, you know, it changes, right? This will never change on this computer. We already did that. I showed you how to do that. So whatever, I'm gonna go ahead and leave this set. I'm gonna load this client up right here, and it's gonna go ahead and start it up, and it connects just fine. You can tell by it loading. Yeah, I'm really passionate about this stuff. I really like programming. Private servers in general are what got me started programming. I'm now in college for this stuff, and let me tell you, I learned so much. Like, it took me about 4 years on my own to learn just about everything I learned in about just a semester in college. You know, and that blew me away. I really feel like I know this stuff, and you know, it's new to just about everyone else that I'm in school with, but it's really simple if you have someone explain this stuff to you, and trying to figure it out on your own can be really complicated. And I feel like I can teach people really well the basics, and once you get the basics down, it's like exponential. You can kind of just do anything that you want regarding computers, and that's not a word of lie. But anyways, I can make more videos about it in the future if people want that kind of stuff. You know, if people are interested in it, I have no problem with that. I'm gonna go ahead and log in real quick. This application that you're seeing is something that I made using Swing. I can go off of more how to do Swing, you know. So this is my own client, and this is my personal private server that I worked on for a long time. This thing has a lot of nostalgic memories, and recently I decided to go into like this deal, like a partnership with a friend of mine who I used to program for in the past. Like he had code that he wanted, and I would charge him a small fee to do, you know, just things of that nature. And then he approached me recently and asked me if I would like to work on a server with him, and I could focus on my degree and just programming while he'll handle all the rest. So I'm thinking about putting this server online very soon. If you might be interested in checking it out, the link will be in the description to the website. Just kind of see what you can do, and some of the things that I can teach people how to program. Like for example, you might want to know how to make your text look like this when you type. You might want to know how to make yourself an administrator. You might want to know how to change the admin logo. You know, you might even want to know how to set up a vote system, so it automatically rewards players for voting for your server, for playing, or like a payment system, a donation system, to where someone can pay money for or donate to the server and get some item like a god sword or whatever it may be that you want to do. I mean, the possibilities are endless. You know, it's left to your imagination at that point. But those are the kind of videos I can make, particular to RSPS, but maybe more based on actually learning how to program in a fun way. So yeah, I think that sums up just about everything that I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, leave it in the comment section below. If this helped you, drop a like. If you want more videos in the future and you want to see those, maybe leave a subscription. So let me know what's up, guys. Let me know what y'all want to see. You know, it really depends on the community whether or not I keep up with this. You know, I'm not. I think it's totally worth it because I have a passion for programming in general. So if I see enough people who are also passionate about this sort of thing, I will definitely keep contributing to this. But anyways, without further ado, good luck, guys.